Very welcome back to OTB AM. It's Ger and Eoin with you every morning from 7:30 until 10 most mornings, but we're streaming all the way until 11 this morning because we're bringing you Keith Wood's State of the Union, which is an in-depth discussion piece, a series of in-depth discussions that we're going to have about the future of rugby union. It's the future of GAA that we're talking about most this morning though, Eoin. If anybody out there has any questions that you want to ask or anything that you need cleared up, 0879 180 180. The GAA statement yesterday brought a fair bit of clarity, I would say. Now, they're still getting hammered by various different people for leaving some wiggle room open to themselves, but they're in a fairly clear damned if you do and damned if you don't scenario at the moment. For clarity's sake, in case anybody missed this, essentially they've said there will be no inter-county action until October, essentially at the earliest. They said they don't expect any until October, which gives them a little bit of wiggle room, but that club action won't be available at least until after everybody is going to train in July for the first time. So they're not going to have any small groups of social distance training, which a lot of people have been hoping for as lockdown was easing.
Yeah, and it had been something that had been mentioned in the roadmap published on Friday as well. It seemed to me that there was a possibility for some very minor GAA activity, and it's what you mentioned there, the socially distanced training that could have gone ahead throughout stage 2 and 3 maybe of the roadmap. But the GAA have come out yesterday and said there will be nothing until stage 4, which is obviously July the 20th. What happens after that? Like, you get into a situation where it's stage 5 that was mentioned, where Gaelic games and small behind closed doors activities could have taken place at that point. I think actually it might have been in the stage 5 part of the roadmap actually on Friday. So like this is still a question mark that's up in the air about all of this, that the government have specifically mentioned the GAA last week, and it seems that the GAA themselves are unsure whether or not that's an achievable target.
Like, certainly you would have assumed that the conversations were a bit more open between the two organisations, and it will be interesting to see which organisation says what conversations have been happening and who breaks ranks on that. Say if there were no conversations happening, that doesn't make any sense from the government's perspective, and if there were conversations happening, it doesn't seem as if communication was very clear on both sides, because they do seem to have slightly different viewpoints here. Even if you think back, I don't know if you heard the Sunday paper review, there was talk about letting the kids back first, and there was kind of you know, not a million miles away from what Luke O'Neill was saying when he was talking about, you know, it's possible that you could have underage action first, and then ultimately that could grade up to, you know, you could have an under 30s challenge match, friendly, whatever, street league if you needed it at some point later on in the year. There was some hope, I know, among parents that coming to Munskell or that the cool camps in the summer, that kind of stuff would actually happen, that you'd be able to go down, have kids playing. I don't know who would actually be the mentors. You probably need to get some teenagers in to do it. But that some kind of graduated return would happen in line with the lockdown roadmap that was published at last weekend. No sign of that. So nothing's going to happen now, essentially, until July.
No, like just to kind of reiterate what the line is from the roadmap document. So July 20th, it said permit sports teams leagues, for example, soccer and GAA, but only where limitations are placed on the number of spectators and where social distancing can be maintained. Now, I'm sure that there's other parts of the roadmap that they move to clarify first, but like, is the intention that where social distancing can be maintained, that pertains to the spectators at an event, or that goes for everybody involved?
No.
That goes for all the players?
And so Aina Falvey's done a full page interview in the Irish Times today with Jerry Thornley, and he's talking about contact, right? And everybody's like, oh, it's contact sports. Players are going to be in contact with each other. He's like, well, hang on, everybody. Basically, without getting too pedantic about it, the term contact is used in epidemiology by the World Health Organization. Contact means is whether or not you've been exposed to an infected person. So say Jerry Thornley's infected right now. The World Health Organization guidelines say that me being a contact of yours means that I've been face-to-face with you within 1 metre for more than 15 minutes, or you would be providing care for somebody who's been sick with COVID-19, or you'd be sharing a house or a workplace or a classroom with somebody who has COVID-19. Basically, this means being in close proximity, because the data out there to date is around aerosol droplet spread. It's not actually about physical contact, if that makes sense. So essentially, all those guidelines that we all had in work before everybody was told to go home, that, you know, you were on the other side of the desk here and that was totally fine because, you know, we weren't spitting in the air and it wasn't for longer than 15 minutes. He's actually gone down to the point where most international props play 60 minutes, and in that the average time would be 8 scrums, a minute per scrum. So they would actually be fine if they weren't also stuck in a ruck for more than 7 minutes over the course of that match. That's the level that the World Rugby are getting to, where they're analysing, you know, what protocols would have to be in place to mitigate the risk. This is obviously a professional sport, right? But you can see where that whole contact in a match is at the lower end of the acceptable level of risk. And then it's the, well, what if I bring something home to people? I suspect that if you are involved with somebody who has an immune difficulty or an underlying condition, then you're actually going to be essentially cocooning or socially distancing anyway. So you're probably not going to be available for a selection for those games.
Without question, that's probably what we kind of considered as well. And not even those people who are cocooning as well, those people who perhaps just had to go to work in a hospital when it came to amateur games. Like, there's no way you could see them being put into a position where they might be exposed to risk in a contact or semi-contact game. That it's just not viable. I guess we're kind of talking about the best case scenario, the young people, the healthy people who are in a situation to not put others at risk. But that's an unbelievably hard thing to pin down. I think when it comes to the GAA statement yesterday, I think it's clear that they want to try and get people into stadiums at some point this year. I'm not saying they want to get full stadiums this year because that's clearly not going to happen. But I mean, socially distanced GAA events, perhaps around a championship. And that's why they've kicked the whole thing back to October at the very least. That's my view on why they're saying what they're saying. But it is interesting what Aviva is putting out there for sure, because there was definitely some confusion about why exactly there was a distinction made between soccer and GAA and rugby.
Well, actually, it's funny. He's disappointed that distinction was made because he doesn't think that it should have been made. And from, granted, the small sample size and the echo chamber of social media, there was a lot of people in the GAA world and pundits going, well, I mean, how can this be considered different from rugby? It was almost as if like the commentariat wanted the GAA to be more conservatively graded, and rugby is like pissed off that it was as conservatively graded as it was with judo and wrestling and wanted to be at the same level as GAA. And I guess that's the amateur versus professional. Like it doesn't. From yesterday's announcement, it seems like there's a good chance that there won't be any inter-county this year. Like realistically, it seems like they're trying to prepare the ground for some sense of that happening, and you can see a lot of people calling for that. And I just don't know if that's necessarily if hurtling that direction at the moment. And I'm not saying the GAA are doing that. I'm saying that there are definitely pockets who are very vocal, who are calling for this to happen immediately. And I don't know if that's necessarily the right thing just yet.
Is it a bit ridiculous that, like, I mean, it's great to get a professional view from someone like Aviva, but it's kind of ridiculous that was the debate for the last couple of days about whether or not GAA should be in stage 4 or stage 5. Should it be considered with wrestling and judo? Should it be considered with soccer? And then rugby, should it be considered up with GAA, as you say? Like, that's really not the argument that needs to be had. Like, I find it interesting as well from the GAA statement yesterday that they simply won't allow any small gatherings of socially distanced GAA players. I guess having a ball, that means you probably, if you're using one ball to actually kick between players, that probably takes away the whole point of social distancing. But on the flip side, like you had Davy Fitzgerald coming out yesterday, kind of not really unhappy actually that this has been done, especially because there is, as we say, the roadmap out there where from May 18 you're supposed to have public sports amenities to be open where social distancing can be maintained. Then on June 8, we were supposed to have people being allowed to engage in outdoor sporting and fitness activities, which would have included pitches. And then you would have got behind closed door sporting activity involved on June 29th. There was definitely an option within the government's roadmap for the GAA to get back to socially distanced training sooner than July 20th.
Yeah, and I'm sure that must be very disappointing for anybody who is involved with the team and would really like that social contact and would really like to get back out and be involved in that sport.
Does it tell us something about how the GAA view the entire organisation once they give the green light? Like they obviously have a duty of care. So what happens if, say June 8th or June 29th, one of those two stages, they said, right, you can go back into your small groups of 4, and then suddenly there's 20 viral videos online of 20 people going training. Do they feel that they would then have the burden of responsibility and it would be a bad PR exercise for them? Maybe, and maybe that's why they've come out and done this. Or maybe perhaps the more trust should be put into the clubs to actually follow through with these sort of protocols earlier than July 20th. It speaks to a lot of things. Like we're obviously just kind of guessing about what the actual intentions are here. But one thing is for certain, I think, as you mentioned there, the idea that we might be crowning an All-Ireland champion in either code this calendar year seems fanciful at this point.
Yeah, unless it's like there's 4 names drawn out of a hat for a weekend blitz, and sometime in December it's like, oh well, come on down Leitrim, All-Ireland hurling champions for 2020, congratulations. I don't know what the answer here is going to be, but the notion that we would just have a club year this year is taking hold from strong voices from the club scene. Is that a possibility? Like, is that we just have inter-county, we have internal county club matches, and that's the sum total of GAA activity this year?
I think if this notion of localised easing of restrictions becomes a reality soon, which it might do, because it was mentioned in the roadmap as well last Friday, and that is definitely something that you could see happening, where certain counties are able to follow through with their own ideas. I personally just have my own suspicions about that and the whole localised element of lockdown restrictions easing, because if that happens, will there be a national easing of travel, for example, and people will travel from affected areas to non-affected areas, and that would become, there will be anecdotal evidence of people travelling all around the country, and that might shut it down. But anyway, I think that it is a possibility for sure that the club comes back first. How much safer or less safe would it be than the inter-county game? Like, I'm not sure. I think obviously at the inter-county game, at the top level of the game, you have a bit more professionalism involved, more staff members, bigger stadiums potentially available to you, and maybe the option of isolation for even a few days before games is a possibility. Whereas at club level, I just can't see that happening.
Alan Milton has been speaking this morning, saying that the players were released from inter-county squads because training loads wouldn't be healthy if the target is October. Socially distancing could be breached if groups gather, and these could be recorded by the public. They don't want to be explaining situations. So essentially that point that you were making there, the various Premier League footballers who were training in small groups who became cause celebs at various stages over the last few months seem to have ruined it for everybody, Eoin. And the GAA are open to holding 2 championships next year. And while behind closed doors would be better than no championship in 2020, it's seen as a last resort. You can get more from that over at offtheball.com. He's been speaking with John Duggan. I like, again, difficult situation for them, because obviously they're in a scenario that they haven't planned for and don't really know exactly what's coming next. And even Éanna Falvey, obviously, who has access to, he says, 80 chief medical officers from different countries around the world feeding into World Rugby, you know, they're all in a very different scenario as well. Australia and New Zealand both look like they're going to have rugby back up and running fairly soon. Australia's way ahead of everybody when it comes to getting sport going, and with the exception of Germany, obviously. But they have managed to flatten the curve. Their reinfection rate is 0 at the moment, and so he was saying that there's a possibility that Australia and New Zealand might be able to play against each other. This again is the scenario where these countries have moved to that point pretty quickly. Like, if we got to that point in 2.5 months' time, you know, who's to say we won't, for example, does all this then get ripped up and it's like, shit, we can actually go here in September, let's go.
Listen, I'm all for that. Like, I'm all for changing your mind. Like, I don't think that anything that we do, especially when it comes to these roadmaps, should be put in concrete at the moment. Like, part of me thought when the GAA statement came out yesterday, God, they've acted quite drastically here. To actually say nothing until October in terms of intercounty, that's quite a long way away. Who knows what might happen between now and then. But then if they change their mind, who cares? Like, who's actually going to be saying, well, they said October, and now all of a sudden intercounty teams might be allowed to train in the middle of September. It's like, I don't think anybody, I don't think anybody in their right mind would be able to actually say that that's a big issue. I think people will welcome the return of activity when it is safe to do so. And if they're being cautious now in terms of what they're planning, that's great, because at least they're checking any unrealistic expectations. And you'd rather be in that position where you're disappointed because the GAA were right and there was no hope of intercounty before the autumn time, rather than them being completely wrong and saying, well, they promised us GAA in September, and it's September now, and this country is still way too unsafe to step outside your front door. So, I think 100% we have to give everybody the ability to change their mind right now.
All right, 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number if you want to get in touch with us. You can always tweet us using the hashtag OTB AM. We've obviously been talking a lot about the depiction of GAA on TV recently, but who are the best GAA players to have never actually played in real life? Owen has put together his 7-a-side GAA team made up of fictitious characters on screen. Have a look.
Normal People has once again put GAA into the international spotlight, with millions of viewers tuning in every single week to see if Connell does indeed make the Sligo minor team. Here is my fictitious 7-a-side GAA team in either code. We're going to start with the goalkeeper position, and in goals we have the goalie who came up against Connell in episode 1 in Normal People. Just kidding. He was shite. The goalkeeper we've gone for is Cahill from the movie Dead Meat, because I suspect that Cahill's puckouts might be absolutely unreal. Exhibit A.
Oh, now go! We have her! We have her! Good! The Scots
So he's literally decapitated a zombie there with a hurley. Does he have the power to take a puck out in a 7-a-side game? Probably. Next up, we've got Sergeant Tom Brandt from Blitz, played by Jason Statham, and I'm putting him in at full back because my sort of full back has this sort of philosophy on hurling.
This, lads, is a hurling. Used in the Irish game of hurling. Cross between hockey and murder.
So fuck, mate!
If you haven't seen Blitz, this scene involves Sergeant Tom Brandt beating up 3 kids with a hurley, making him the most terrifying man to ever pick up a hurley, after Deemer the Rock O'Sullivan. At centre back, we've got Connell from Normal People. Now, you'll have noticed in episode 1 of Normal People, he was wearing 10 on his back, completely out of position. He's not a wing forward. Even that goal, completely lucky. He shanked the ball into the back of the net. Let's be straight about it. So I think if we move him further away from goal, we can get peak Connell. And I suspect there might be a big future for him at centre half back. Onto the midfield, and we've got James Ignatius Rooney from the movie Rooney in midfield. And he might be the most complete hurler we have in the team, taking his talents from St. Vincent's GAA to Croke Park, destroying all comers. He's a man, he's a myth, he's a legend. He's obviously a legend because he doesn't exist. He is possibly the most complete fictitious athlete since White Goodman in dodgeball. Joining Rooney in midfield is Phil Kelly from The Clash of the Ash. Now I know what you're going to say, he's used to playing more as an inside forward, as a corner forward with his club, but I think he's too good for there. We're going to bring him out to the pitch into midfield. One of the most skillful fictitious hurlers I've ever seen. And he's also got a lot of passion. He's got a bit of an aggression that we're going to need in this team.
Where is he? You can forget about him! Get on your career! There'll be no job in the bank for you!
At centre forward, we've got the kid from the Kilfinnan Brua Under-12B team who appears in Brain Eater. He is one of the riskiest fictitious hurlers I've ever seen and can also boast of having the ability to take a zombie's head clean off. He's also going to be our free taker because, well, look at this accuracy. As the old saying goes, if you can put a slitter into a zombie's eye, you can put a slitter over the black spot. And finally, we've got the unnamed guy from the Barry's ads.
See you.
See you.
He's a grand lad, Connor. And he's turned into a lovely footballer. A very sweet player.
Yeah. Very sweet.
Very sweet player? Must be a corner forward. However, I've got good news for you, unnamed man from Barry's ad. I'm making you captain.
So, did you hear he made me captain?
That's a pity. I was hoping he'd drop you.
Why?
Well, if you weren't training so much, you might have a bit more free time.
So that's our fictitious 7-a-side GAA team complete. Congratulations to everybody who made it. Commiserations to everybody who didn't, except for you, the constable from the Black and Tans who appeared in the wind that shakes the barley holding a hurl. Yeah, don't think hurling is your game. For some reason, just felt like your heart wasn't in the old GAA.
It turns out that Barry's had invented sex on TV as opposed to normal people own.
Yeah, the tension there is unbearable and probably too steamy for 8:17 on a Thursday morning.
Come here, I didn't realise that there was such a genre, really, as hurlers versus zombies. It turns out that this is obviously been this entire subculture in Ireland for the last decade and a half, 2 decades, and I had no idea about it.
It's mad. It's fantastic. Clearly, if you want a weapon to take down the zombie, what happens if after COVID-19 the next thing we have to worry about is a zombie apocalypse? Get your hurleys out. Canning hurleys will be doing unbelievable business if there's a zombie apocalypse, I dare say.
Where did you see Clash of the Ash?
I saw it on YouTube.
Is the whole thing there?
Yeah, the full Clash of the Ash is on YouTube. It's great. It's so obviously I got a bit carried away watching a lot of that stuff yesterday, but I didn't have time to watch the full thing. But I need to go back and watch it. It's properly good. That the hurling scenes in that and in Rooney, like Rooney is. Have you seen Rooney? Like it's we had Sean Crossan in last year talking about his GAA on film book, and it was the first time I'd actually seen it. It's hilarious, properly funny, and really good depiction of hurling as well.
And so sorry, Rooney's on YouTube as well, is it?
Yeah, both of those are fully.
Right.
Everything there is fully available on YouTube, I think, except for maybe not the full Dead Meat, but certainly that hurling scene, or the scene with the hurley of Dead Meat is on YouTube.
Okay, good stuff there. That whole thing is up on our social channels now for you, and we might put some links up to those YouTube. You can look them up yourselves. You know, YouTube works, for God's sake. 18 minutes past 8 this morning here, and the GAA has convened a 14-person COVID-19 advisory group. The association remains committed to producing club and inter-county championships this year. However, the latter won't occur until October at the earliest, we expect now. With that in mind, counties have been instructed to suspend inter-county training for now, and I think reminded as well about insurance issues too. The GAA maintains there is no appetite within the association to play games behind closed doors, but that position may change. In soccer, the Aviva Stadium is believed to be under consideration as a single venue to host League of Ireland games upon its return. All team sports are obviously suspended until the 20th of July at the earliest, as per the government's roadmap, but Niall Quinn says playing games at one neutral venue is an option being considered. The 15th of May has been confirmed as the Bundesliga's return date. That's 8 days away from now before we all row in behind one of the Berlin teams, or indeed perhaps Borussia Dortmund. The German Football League communicated the date to its 36 clubs last night. It follows the federal government's decision to allow the top 2 divisions resume behind closed doors training. And in cycling, there could be a women's Tour de France as soon as 2022. Earlier this week, cycling's world governing body, the UCI, included a women's Paris-Roubaix on its revised calendar for the first time. Christian Prudhomme says a women's equivalent could ideally take place after the men's edition the year after next. Here's what's coming up for you this morning. Anthony Moyle is going to join us around about 8:40 after we bring you through the sports pages to talk to us about various things that are happening. Obviously, the GAA's response yesterday. We'll get the club players' view, and we might also talk a little bit of economics with him. Martin McNally is going to talk to us about our Off the Couch today, and Eric Killeen is doing that for us, Johnny Murphy is with us from 9:30, and Keith Wood's State of the Union at 10 o'clock this morning. Time for the sports pages.
OTB AM.
Starting obviously as we always do with offtheball.com, and it is I got silence Pat Nevin on the menacing Alex Ferguson dressing down. So he was telling the story, if you missed it a little bit earlier on, that he didn't get the hairdryer treatment from Ferguson. It was worse than that. Ferguson asked him a question, he got the answer wrong. Ferguson kind of looked at him and walked off, and that was the end of that. Pierluigi Collina was arrogant. It was heartbreaking. It's Kevin Kilbane and Russell Osman talking about Everton making it all the way to the Champions League and then getting knocked out by Villarreal. I didn't want to be captain. Sean Fitzpatrick talking about playing for the All Blacks. And we cannot let hurling die. This is centuries of our tradition. Brilliant stuff from Paul Rouse as usual. If you haven't read his book, The Hurlers, now's a good time to dig it out. It's kind of got this amazing cinematic opening where a team is heading over to New York, and all sorts of great stuff in that as well. So I recommend that if that's one of the things that you do during lockdown, then get to it.
The Irish Independent this morning leads with the story from the GAA yesterday. 2020 All-Ireland looks further away. Cautious approach sees suspension of GAA activity continue for another 11 weeks. If it was me, I would risk health to play, says Kilkenny legend Tommy Welsh, meanwhile. And Gavin says, I won't manage Dubs again. So Jim Gavin has been speaking, saying that he wouldn't return to the Dublin manager's job. He's been doing an exclusive online interview with a former schoolmate, Jim Kelly, of Lansdowne Yonkers FC. And Gavin quashed any possibility of him returning to the role. I don't see that happening, he said. I really gave it as much as I could for as long as I could. And I was involved in enough teams that fragmented is probably the polite way to put it. And elsewhere in the Irish Independent then this morning, how golf plans to get back on course. Neil Francis writing about how the IRFU needs to stand shoulder to shoulder with its patrons, and Quinn hints Aviva as likely venue for League of Ireland games.
The Irish Times this morning leads with GAA happy to play the waiting game. That's the headline on Sean Moran's piece dealing with the statement that came through yesterday. And questions raised as to why players can't train in small groups. That's David Fitzgerald, I guess, and a bunch of other people are kind of asking, can we not just go training? The Australian Open could be cancelled due to COVID-19. It was able to take place in January. So the Australian Open was able to take place in January as scheduled, but French Open organisers obviously moved the clay court major back to September. Will that happen then in September? I mean, maybe. Next year might not escape. Worst case scenario is no Australian Open, he told everybody yesterday. And then they've got that full page interview with Éanna Falvey, which is good on detail about how contact sports aren't actually contact per the World Health Organization guidelines.
The Irish Examiner this morning leads with Kieran Shannon's piece, time to give serious thought to writing off the season. And he's right here, really, isn't it? Like, it's definitely a possibility that the GAA Championship won't happen this year. And if it can't happen this year, is it really viable to play two of them next year, especially if you go into 2021 with an air of unknowing? So Kieran Shannon saying that the purgatory that the players are existing and the managers are existing in at the moment just is far worse than the situation of calling off the entire thing. This is an interesting story here as well in the Examiner. Cahill stopped day training before GAA's call. This is Waterford hurling boss Liam Cahill, who was on Zoom to his players last week and actually stepped in ahead of the GAA and stopped them from doing their own bits and pieces alone and stuff. Just called the thing off because he said clarity was really important. Turns out he was right. Straight knockout championship planned for autumn. Writes John Fogarty and Owen Cormack, and it will have to be championship, you'd imagine, if anything's going to happen this year. And then you've got quotes there as well from Tommy Welsh again. Without a vaccine, I'd be worried for other people, he says.
The Daily Mail, their back page headline this morning is, that's the UK one, we'll send you down, the Premier League clubs. And then this one here is GAA back on hold, GAA scrap plan to return amid rising concerns. And then that's a picture of Sun Heung-min in South Korea on duty. And beaten Pichot to quit World Rugby is the other story that they have there. Argentinian revolutionary Agustin Pichot is said to quit World Rugby after his election defeat. He won 23 out of 51 votes, but apparently that's not enough. Swing voters like Japan and Fiji were lured away by short-term promises, and he is out.
The Mirror this morning leads with a photograph of Manuel Neuer trying to get to a ball there. Germans off to a flyer. Premier League given hope as the Bundesliga is set to be first to return to action in May. Counties wait until October is the line on the GAA, and then a few football stories in at the top. Souness says days of huge wages over. A story about the Aviva then as well. One stadium idea for League of Ireland matches, according to Niall Quinn, and United told to wait for Sancho. Just on the Bundesliga, just had a quick look at the table there. Fortuna Dusseldorf is the team you want to get on for a bandwagon because they're in a relegation scrap. They're on 22 points, 4 points behind 15th place Mainz. And then there's a load of teams on 27, 28. So you want a relegation scrap instead of going for Munich or Dortmund. And I don't know, supporting a team to qualify for a European place is always a boring activity. So Fortuna Dusseldorf, you have a new fan.
Okay, looking forward to that. Dusseldorf, good city, bad city. It was an important meeting point for some peace process meeting. At one point, John Hume had a Dusseldorf meeting, I think.
Well, I've just realised actually that there's a playoff in the Bundesliga relegation, isn't there? That the team that finishes third bottom actually goes into a playoff. So actually, there's no jeopardy for you want to be going for Werder Bremen then, who are actually below them and in the automatic relegation positions. So Dusseldorf or Bremen, take your pick. But I'm going to buy both jerseys right now. The
back page of the Irish Sun this morning. Project non-starter. Bundesliga back, but Prem is project non-starters. There, one clubs to let stars opt out if they want, agree or lose the season. Premier League clubs have been warned, agree to neutral venues or the season will be cancelled. And there's a thought that maybe that's what Villa are trying to get to happen. But then there's also the threat that they'll just relegate the bottom three in the table as it stands. October, Davy keen to train. Davy Fitzgerald has questioned the GAA's request to suspend all inter-county training after Croke Park revealed there will be no county games until at least October. And League of Ireland won for the neutrals. That's the plan that they have to use the Aviva as a neutral stadium.
The back of the Irish Daily Star this morning goes with the headline, Cruel Summer, no inter-county until October, no club activity until July 20th, and GAA managers voice big concerns. Davy Fitzgerald, the most vociferous of those. Germans' leap of faith, meanwhile, is the headline of Manuel Neuer in training, and League of Ireland could play on at the Aviva.
Okay, so after the Star, we got the Telegraph for you, and the Telegraph this morning, which I just don't have right in front of me. Here we go. Germany leads way with football and racing, ready to restart. League 1 and 2 set for vote to end season. Celebrations to be banned on Premier League returns, so there'll be no more jumping up and down on players and rubbing up against them, rubbing your COVID up at them. And then that is, again, Son Heung-min, barely recognisable in his camouflage army uniform with a gun slung over his shoulder. But we're going to get used to watching players playing masks, perhaps. And no scrums, tackles or mauls. RFU plans for reduced rugby. Not quite what Aina Falvey is saying, but this is an exclusive from Gavin Mayers, the chief rugby correspondent of The Telegraph. By rugby activity, we are definitely not talking about 15-a-side, full-on contact rugby, said Steve Granger, the RFU's Director of Rugby Development. There are a whole range of activities you could create without having 16 people in a scrum. That's probably the most invasive and intensive form of contact that we're going to have, or a pile of people in a ruck. Essentially, Rugby League.
Mm-hmm.
Rugby League seems to be the perfect rugby sport right now for the post-COVID era, right?
For tag rugby.
I mean, you can actually have proper... So, if Alvy's talking about, like, if I tackle you around the legs, that's less...
Fine.
Exactly. Well, it's far less risky. You can accept that that is less risky than us being in the scrum side by side, breathing all over each other.
Mm-hmm. How would we transfer with our rugby union team? Are you any good at rugby league?
I don't know. I mean, we have at least got one of the best coaches in the world for this new scenario.
Well, that's a very good point.
So we're well stocked with that.
Yeah, I, for one, welcome our new rugby league direction. Let's do it. And Andy Farrell, rugby league Grand Slam winner with Ireland. Right, will I move on to The Guardian?
Yeah.
They're leading with a cricket story here. Test players face 9 weeks away from family. This is to do with Test cricket's plan to get back underway this summer with a series of tests between England and the West Indies. And as it's suggested in the headline there, they're thinking about isolation techniques for the entire England squad. And Villa confirm opposition to plan for neutral grounds finish. Bundesliga back this month, meanwhile, green light for first major European league to resume. And a new start, how women's game can recover after a long hiatus.
The London Times have some pretty interesting stories here. Chance to watch every game. That's Leo Messi, by the way, with the mask on. Masked Messi back in action. Chance to watch every game on TV. So they're saying that football fans will be able to watch almost all 200 remaining matches in the Premier League and Championship live, with scheduling officials and broadcast partners looking to give as many fixtures as possible a slot. This will be wild, like a 2 o'clock kickoff, a 4 o'clock kickoff, a 6 o'clock kickoff, an 8 o'clock kickoff for a number of days in a row. The proposal is dependent on the government giving permission for football to resume. The Times understands the scheduling plan already has government support because it'll help to keep people indoors and dissuade some fans from trying to gather at the neutral venues being used by their teams. The German government yesterday gave the green light for the Bundesliga to return, but the intention is to stage 3 or 4 Premier League and Championship games every day at different kick-off times until the end of July. 92 Premier League games left to be played and 108 in the Championship.
A lot of television.
All football, all the time. Football, 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 all football, all the time.
Well, if they can get away with like doing these incredible production, bringing these incredible production values to the table, then I'd be all for it. So like, it's actually a live fly on the wall documentary. Cameras on the dressing room wall, audio attached, mic'd up managers, mic'd up refs, mic'd up players, special camera angles, special access. then it becomes a really appealing product for the full day.
One of the things that was very noticeable from watching any of the Italian 90 games or indeed Euro 88 was Mick McCarthy's voice carries. In a full stadium, full of drunk Irish and English fans, you can hear Mick McCarthy screaming, and particularly in the Holland game, when the game peters out, you can totally hear him screaming. It's going to be interesting to hear the language being used by many Premier League players at the moment as the games progress, as the silence of the eerie, empty stadium becomes the thing that we're most aware of acutely, and then suddenly it's like, footballer X screaming abuse at footballer Y and dropping swear bombs all over the place, and there's no way around it. Or when they get to the referee and start screaming in his face, it's like, everybody can hear you, right? Because there's nothing to drown you out here.
Well, I'm just looking forward to hearing what the likes of Jamie Vardy are actually saying. He just seems to be yapping a lot, even when he scores and he runs to the opposition crowd, basically 9 times out of 10, gloats in front of them, and then usually says something while he's got his hands cupped to his ears. I want to be able to hear what Jamie Vardy's actually saying. I think the person we probably hear most from is someone like Jordan Henderson, who seems to be shouting quite a lot. Even when there's no need to shout, he does tend to do that quite a bit. So I think we'll hear a lot from him.
I'd like to see Wayne Rooney. I mean, I will watch all of Derby's games just to hear what Wayne Rooney's saying on the pitch.
I would love to turn back the clocks to when Wayne Rooney first started and have him mic'd up. Yeah. When he was a brat as a kid, the stuff he used to say to referees just looked unbelievable.
Yeah.
And to opponents.
Yeah. No, 100%. Right. The last one there was the Derby and the Oaks might run off on the same day at Epsom, but there's a debate about whether or not they're going to be able to close off the Epsom track and make it safe. But it could be the 4th of July that you'll have both. The Derby was due to take place on the 6th and the Oaks was due to take place the day before, but now they're looking at keeping it all the way back to the 4th of July, and that will be a big day's racing. And I think there's a lot of that stuff that we have to look forward to over the course of the summer, where there will be a lot of us watching a lot of things that maybe in the past we would have gone, that's interesting, I'm interested in these 2 things that are happening today, I'm going to watch this one. But some of them will actually have our undivided attention, unless of course the meaningless dead rubber at the end of the season between 2 mid-tier championship matches, 2 mid-tier championship teams is on at the same time, and that's the only thing that anybody's watching. Right, I just want to tell you about this. There's been so many examples of people around the country doing fairly remarkable things. Dubliner Mick Quinn has so far raised over 30 grand in 3 days for MS Ireland after successfully running a marathon in his back garden last weekend in memory of his brother Frank. They had initially set a target of 15 grand and the target is now 35 grand. You can donate at Mick Quinn's Marathon for MS Ireland. If you just search for that, Mick Quinn's Marathon for MS Ireland, and if you can donate to that, if that's a cause that is close to your own heart. This is a famous publican, obviously, Toner's Pub. I think people will have seen the pictures of this funeral doing the rounds maybe in the last month. And anyway, Mick Quinn has done his marathon. I think he did it in a Tyrone jersey as well. So fair play to him. He's already raised just over 31,000 euro, and is aiming for 35 grand. So we wish him all the best. And if anybody can donate, Mick Quinn's Marathon for MS Ireland is what you need to get into there. So next, we're going to hear a little bit from Kevin Kilbane and Leon Osman. Obviously, no live sport, no problem. Virgin Media Sport are airing over 10 hours of classic games each weekend to celebrate some of those great moments in sport. I know next weekend they're going to be doing the Juventus-Manchester United's second leg from 1999, which is one of the best sports matches involving an Irish person that I can remember. 2 Irish people that I can ever remember. But anyway, last night Kevin Kilbane and Leon Osman joined Joe to chat through Everton's ill-fated Champions League run. Have a look.